Hey, welcome in everyone to So You Wanted a Podcast, episode 2. I'm SwdofBerserk, and I have with me here today Mr. Sheridan. And we are going to have some nice conversations about game development, programming, the back end of video games, as it were. Can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure. I'm Sheridan. I currently live in Colorado, but I've lived in 4 different states now. So I bounce around a lot. I'm going to bounce around again in about 12 months. So probably going to go to Washington. But professionally, I guess, I do a bunch of engineering, and that's pretty much all I've ever done. I started doing that when I was 13 in earnest. I guess otherwise I do a lot of hiking, play a lot of games, make some games, and as well, especially here, basically if the weather allows, I'll be outside.
Yeah, I've always known you to be a very outdoorsy kind of guy. For being behind a computer monitor for a lot of your day, you certainly try to make the time to go outside.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I used to be very attached to my computer for years and years, even to the point where, like, if I wasn't on it, I was kind of like upset, like I was like agitated because I wasn't getting to play my game or chat on. Back then it was IRC, not Discord yet, but so that dates me a little probably. But
I mean, it got there eventually.
Yeah. But yeah, I went camping for the first time, I think in like my mid-20s, and which would now be 11 or 12 years ago, and when I did that, I don't know, like my whole life changed.
Really? See, I grew up camping like every weekend because I was a Boy Scout growing up, and so from like 10 to 18. Probably every other weekend I was camping, or it felt like that, in all weather, doing all kinds of stuff. It was great. I don't know, just the smell of the campfire, simple meals, a lot of talking happens camping.
Yes. Yeah. Me and my buddy Johnny. He was my best friend from when we were in high school. We live in different states now, and life shifts a little bit, so we're not as close as we were, but yeah, we went out camping a couple of times, and you end up, I think that is one of the things I like most about it. Whoever you're camping with, you get to know them pretty well. Yeah,
there's a lot of good conversations. I think that's also where I sort of fell in love with board games, because I mean, back when I was camping in like the early 2000s, like the 90s pretty much, there was no internet. There was no nothing. There was just, you had a chessboard or you had a deck of cards, and that was what you had. Other than that, you were talking and probably either deciding what you were, or eating the meal you had prepared, or preparing the next meal, or keeping the fire lit.
Yeah. It's fun. Later this year, we're going to go up into the Washington Olympic Forest. We're going to spend like at least a week there, and do a bunch of the trails there and go around the forest and stuff like that.
Camp the full week. That's nice.
Yep.
It's nice. It's awesome. I wish I had more time to go out and do more camping stuff, but that's always like just a thing that you have to make time for. It always seems like it's got a lot wrapped up in it, especially if you're going to take a week. That's pretty ambitious.
Yeah. You also have to like practice some stuff, I think, to be comfortable going out for a week. Maybe this is another podcast episode.
Yeah, maybe the camping podcast.
But
spoiler alert for later. I mean, we could just scrap the programming podcast and just talk about woodsmanship if you want.
No, that's all right.
Yeah. Okay. So we did have a plan to talk about programming and engineering and the kind of the back end of game development today to segue off of camping.
Yeah.
I guess the first thing is just like what are some programming what is it, what do you need to do to make a game? What does programming a game actually consist of?
Well, it's actually a lot more than programming, which I think can be good or bad depending on who you are. So, some people are very intimidated by programming, and that could be comforting to them to know that maybe programming, especially if you do certain things, programming might only be like 15 or 20% of the project. You can have certain, like a walking simulator, for example, something like Firewatch. There's almost no programming in something like that. Very, very little. But something like, let me think, like The Sims, or really anything that's a simulation. Something that's kind of in the middle might be something like Dishonored, or anything that's multiplayer is going to suddenly have a high amount of code. But that's only one facet of it. It's the rest of it is design and art. And so for me, as someone who's been programming for 23 years,
A whole person, right?
Yeah. The code was not intimidating to me at all. That you do need to get to know whatever engine you're using, but the programming is a breeze.
I'm sure whatever engine you choose, there are advantages and disadvantages depending on what you're trying to do. You wouldn't use the same thing to necessarily create an app as something you would try and work on your PC or whatever.
Yeah. So for me, the rub, I guess, was in learning the engine that I was using. What's the pros and cons of the different engines, which I pretty much compared Unity, Unreal, and Godot. And then it was a matter of choosing a tool set, getting a workflow, and learning enough art to like get anything done. So for me, that was 3D modeling. I also got some books on like lighting for visual artists, and Rachel, my girlfriend, is like a more proper artist, and so she knows about like color and composition and how you use like shadows and what sort of ratios of light to dark, or how much of the grayscale you use, and value studies like that. All that stuff is what can make a game really come alive and be incredible. Story and writing would also be in there somewhere. So like you think about something like Alan Wake. So I went and studied screenshots from Alan Wake, and they do all of that stuff. But that's stuff that's kind of unknown to a lot of video game players.
I mean, they don't think about all the parts of it because you've got, I mean, you got the business side of things, right? You got to make sure that the money lines up to make sure that you have the right number of people working on your project, that it gets published and put out there to the right people. It's on the right platform. It's at the right price point. It's been, it's got all of those things. And you've got, okay, what do you actually do in the game without any flavor? What is the mechanics of the game? And then getting the mechanics of the game to operate. And then after that, you've got to dress it up. You got to make it pretty. You got to have some kind of theme, some kind of art, some kind of story to tie it all together to make it palatable. Otherwise, it's just number sim, jumping sim. It could be, it could be anything, right? So all of that. Keeping it all together in a plan, right, would be pretty important, you would say. Because I don't think you just spontaneously arrive at some perfect situation of all of these things. Like you don't end up with the right balance of things unless you construct it. Because if you don't know what kind of game you're building, then what you could. I guess you could start with the flavor part of it and then go from there. It's like, oh, I want to play a game that I'm a bird or something like that, doing some kind of fairy tale thing or whatever, then you're like, okay, we got a bird, we probably need to fly, and you kind of build the mechanics off of that. Or you could have mechanics and then you can, coat the mechanics with stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really, especially for certain types of games, all of them you're doing that to some extent. So another thing that I've done a lot of is actually, I don't think much of anybody knows this actually, but is literature. So I got really into writing when I was a little kid. I would write stories about Bugs Bunny and stuff. And
why Bugs Bunny? Why Looney Tunes? I guess you saw Bugs Bunny on TV. So
I did. Yeah. No, I'm talking about like a little kid. Like I could barely like write. And so yeah, I would write stories about like Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam and the Road Runner, and then later I wrote stories about the Smurfs. And then as I got older, then I started, like when I was in my early teens, I would do like fan fiction and stuff of like Final Fantasy or whatever.
Oh, there you go.
And yeah, and then finally I grew up, and
I mean, you laugh, you think it's funny. My wife pretty much only reads fan fiction. That is what she reads. Like 90% of the stuff she reads is fan fiction, and she still chews through a couple of books every month. She reads all the time. So
yeah, it's good.
That has certainly become like a huge thing for a lot of people, is fan fiction. Anyways, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's all right. But eventually I grew up and got interested in like full blown literature, and like read a bunch of classics and started becoming well read, and got into philosophy and, doing the more like adult academic version of it. As part of that, I learned how stories work. And one of the things, if you're doing a literary fiction, like if you've ever, like Murakami is really popular, Haruki Murakami, he would be literary fiction. If you're doing something like that, you actually start from your themes, like what am I saying, and I think in a lot of cases, outside of like some kind of like hyper casual game, the idea is the same. So like I look at Prey, which was a great game, the 2016 one. That one, not to give like any spoilers or anything, but that game is about identity, what makes you who you are, and is it your choices? Is it your makeup? Is it actually like what you are? Which is very close to a spoiler. But like in the very beginning of the games, one of the first things that you do is go through the looking glass. Alice in Wonderland. It's like that game is like super literary, I would say, and has some literary references in it. So I think when they made that story, I think they started from that like egg of let's talk about identity. And that's because I'm interested in like philosophy and belief and stuff. So like identity is one of the things that I could go on and on and on about. So I don't want to get sidetracked.
For sure. I mean, some of my favorite storylines involve identity. I can't rave enough about like Soma, for example.
Yeah.
I don't know. It paints a perspective. But yeah, I mean, you can certainly have like top down or bottom up is pretty much what the card terminology is, or the board game terminology. Are you a top down? Are you are you a top down? Like do you take your theme and overlay it on some system, or are you a bottom up person? Do you have a system that you're trying to just like turn into something more creative than Punching Simulator?
Yeah. So like for me, like that's how I write, but that's also how I approach game dev, is like start from that, build things. If you're talking about identity, you go look for things or concepts that speak to identity. Like the ship of Theseus was a thing way back in the day, written about by Plutarch. But
is it the same ship?
Yeah. It's like if we change all the planks, like we've restored the ship for hundreds of thousands of years. We changed all the planks. Is it still Theseus's ship?
It's the if you have an axe and you replace the axe head, is it the same axe? If you then replace the handle, is it still the same axe?
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, they'll say yes, because it's the experience that like existence of an axe has gone through, you know?
Yeah. But then sometimes you have an idea that's really cool, but it doesn't serve your theme in any way.
Right.
So you gotta toss it.
Yeah. And there's definitely there's definitely sometimes that people try and make things go together that don't necessarily fit. Sometimes you end up with some cool stuff. Yeah. Having a good laid out plan that lays out everything synergistically to make sure that you're building systems that support the story that you're trying to tell, that, you know, supports the message that you want to have. Just it all falls in together. So there's a lot of visual elements when it comes to making games, and you had said that you know, your girlfriend Rachel goes through, or is more arty than you, but you've been working on a lot of 3D modeling and things like that. When you're working on stuff, how much time do you typically spend messing around with making things pretty? How much have you tooled around with you know, operational physics of different engines, just seeing what you can do?
Yeah. A good bit on like fooling around with engines and stuff. So most of that was just tinkering. It also caused me to very quickly put down a couple of engines. If I'm using a commercial engine now, it's pretty much hands down Unreal, because when I was tinkering, I just found that everything that was like really commonplace to do was so much easier in Unreal. So I ditched Unity, especially for that reason. But Godot is not a bad engine. It's not, since I like to do 3D stuff, the 3D renderer of Godot is just not in the same place that Unreal's is. And so if you want like high fidelity 3D, then Godot just isn't going to serve you that well. Also, you know, Unreal has like Niagara, which is the visual effects engine. And that was something that I found that I really loved, was visual effects. I think in general, I really like technical art, which is probably something we could get into. Like, you know, Rachel, like I got really good at, as far as other art, I got really good at Blender, the software. And I have like a whole workflow that I use. I use Substance Painter, Substance Designer for making materials. And then those are both Adobe products. And then I have something called Character Creator, which is really nice for also very expensive.
Is it like a Unreal plugin to help you build character design inside, or
it's its own standalone software. You can use it with anything, but it does have an Unreal plugin with it where you can export your characters to Unreal. It's really nice. So pretty much for characters, what I do is I'll do my first mock-up in Character Creator, and then I take it into Blender and make any changes that I want to make. So like if you were doing something really stylized, or you want to add like, you know, scars, or I don't know, you want to chop one of their arms off and replace it with a prosthetic or whatever, that's all something you have to go do yourself in Blender. Then you bring it back, and then you take it into some kind of animation tool, which for me is Blender again. But
if it does the job, it does the job, right?
Yeah, Blender's really nice.
Yeah, and so you said that you were specifically focusing a lot of your time with Unreal. I know Unreal has a billion assets that are like programmed for it that you can mix and match if you know, if you're not necessarily like, if you have a game concept that you want to turn into reality, but you're not an artsy guy, you can, I mean, put at least while you're building it out, you can put in whatever kind of like models you want to just shove in there. Or use the generic stuff. I mean, like Dark and Darker pretty much grabbed all just generic art stuff and put it together and made a great game. So sure that happens tons.
Yeah, asset packs are really nice. I'm not against using them at all. I guess the thing that I would say about asset packs is that if you don't, so this is one of the things where like design and art comes in. Like every game should have an artistic direction. So Dishonored is a great example. Dishonored has like a really specific artistic direction. It's really unique, and they stick to it everywhere, even in their player menu. Like when you hit escape and go to save and all that, even that fits into the art direction. I think an indie may not want to spend so much time on their UI, but the point is you have this art.
I mean,
direction.
You keep bringing up immersive sims. I think you just like immersive sim. All of these have incredibly. I would think that you were saying that they might not take as much. I understand like online net coding stuff that you need to make sure that networks can talk to each other and shit. But like, I'm really surprised that something like specifically you bring up Dishonored and you bring up Prey, two well known immersive sims. I mean, like Deathloop is it probably takes all of that and adds the online multiplayer element to it, right? I'm surprised that making a simulated world wouldn't require that much programming.
It's not too bad. Like it's one of those things that like sounds really bad, I guess, to like someone that isn't. So here's kind of a comparison between those. Like let's compare like I don't know, RuneScape versus Dishonored.
Sure, because you have every person that's on the server on it at once. You got hundreds of people, right?
Yeah. I mean, I actually worked on 2 different Star Wars Galaxies projects where Star Wars Galaxies, which shut down in like I don't know, 2011 or 12 or something.
Something like that.
Something around there. Let's see. Oh yeah, there was a Star Wars Galaxies emulator, and then there was Star Wars Galaxies Restoration. I've contributed a little bit to both of those projects. Those are both MMOs. They are enormously code heavy, and so we can compare a little bit of why that is. So they have a completely custom server. Anytime you're going to do anything multiplayer, like Unity, Unreal, etc., they try to sell you these networking solutions, and they even say that they're like MMO scalable and stuff.
Oh, like Unreal tries to sell you on their internal system.
Yeah, or some kind of plugin or something.
Interesting. That's I wouldn't. Okay, all right. I see. I'm seeing you, Unreal.
Yeah, those are not. Unity is especially bad about it.
Well, Unity also had that big thing about charging people more money based on like number of purchases of installs. Yeah.
They completely rolled that back.
Oh, good. It seems like it. Obviously, people didn't like it very much.
Yeah. I think they were also developing a queue of lawsuits.
That makes sense.
Someone probably was just like, you know what? We're done with this.
I mean, there's that guy, right? There's always that what was it? Profit potential guy that's just like, all right, this lawsuit costs more than fixing the problem. We're just going to fix the problem.
Yeah, like a chief revenue officer or something responsible for just making sure you're profitable. Yeah, I'm sure they didn't like that. But so a lot of these plugins and stuff are lies. So if you want something that's actually going to scale, I mean, even AAA makes these errors, right? Like, if I was in the industry, I could consult on these bigger things, but like Diablo, Blizzard has made the same error a couple of times.
Every WoW launch, every Diablo, every game launch where the server crashes on the first night because they can't handle the load of the initial number of users.
Yeah. And you just get into all these things of like, how are we storing user data? And there are patterns for that. You get into like databases, how much is in memory, how long do we keep in memory until we save, and you develop your whole server protocol. You have things like client prediction, which is in an MMO when you like say you're going to mine a resource, you click on it, your character runs up to it, starts mining. The client may not actually know that there's anything there yet. It has to be validated by the server, but the client believes that there is. So the client's going to go ahead and put your character into motion so that your eyeballs see it. Like early RuneScape, you notice that when you clicked to move, there was like a second or a second and a half where you just stand there and then your guy starts moving. Because there was no client prediction. It had to validate everything with the server. So and then you get into all these like complex data structures like quad trees or oct trees, but to basically facilitate like how you divide up a region based on the population density, how much you're going to render.
Yeah, and stuff like do you have instanced areas? Is like every area is an instance? What's the going from one instance to another instance? Like in WoW, pretty much if you're within one region of each other, you pretty much have it all technically loaded in the background or whatever.
Yeah.
I imagine that also coming in there with like, ragging on Blizzard a little bit, but not really. But like there's a lot of things that go into protecting the like you were talking about not necessarily personal information, but your game information, like loot in games, like actual items on your character. You're like a World of Warcraft character is worth money. A Diablo character is potentially worth money in stuff. And making sure that people can't abuse the system, or you get like New Age where people are duping all the major currency and
Yeah, and that's all stuff that I like know how to. Part of me would like really enjoy getting involved in like the a server or the anti-cheat section of the gaming industry. I think I would have fun with that because anti-cheat.
You want to be the defender.
Yeah, anti-cheat is like a whole other thing that involves like coding, doing like Windows kernel programming and stuff like it gets incredibly complex.
I mean, there's also a bunch of stuff that goes along with that kind of thing, like trying to ban out bot waves and stuff. Exactly. and having strategies to make it so you can ban as many as you can or whatever. Keep whatever you're trying to do down. I know that that's one of the reasons why Blizzard would do waves of them, is if they did them too frequently, then people that were botting would figure out how they were figuring out that they were bots, and so then they could be better bots, and so they waited until they had a certain threshold before they banned everybody. So they get all of them without having to develop some new way of figuring out if they're bots.
Yeah. Their anti-cheat system, Warden, is really good. It's one of the best. But yeah, they do that, I think, for two reasons. One is so you don't get immediate feedback on whether or not your hack worked. And then two, it actually boosts their profits, because if a cheat works for a little while and then you get banned, then you're more likely to roll it up and try again. Versus like if you just got instantly blasted the second you did something wrong, people wouldn't try as much.
That's weird. And I guess every time they ban a person, it's like, okay, you got to rebuy the game, right? So
yep.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, or have a key gen or something. Yeah.
Okay. So you had mentioned you'd worked on a couple different Star Wars games. What is like what are you working on right now? Do you have any game projects that are currently occupying your brain space?
Well, right now I actually have a writing project that's occupying my brain space. So I don't have a personal project in the game space right now. Because I basically have to choose one creative pursuit at a time. I don't have time to have an endless wheel of them, but I am still technically on the team for Star Wars Galaxy's Restoration. What I was doing for them when I was active was I was just making their launcher. The thing that starts up the client, scans your computer, does the verify files and deletes mods and warns you if your files are out of date and automatically updates and
a very
handles,
key yet forgotten component of the MMO.
yeah. Like, so that whole thing was mine. I did also have a project that I was working on with a couple of buddies prior to that, where I was mostly doing art for them. I was doing art props, so I made like a tree, and we made like a little pot, and just like kind of stuff like that.
Some animals, bears, stuff like that.
Yeah,
some general forestry.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That's pretty cool. So you're a passive developer for, I'm sorry, Star Wars. Which Star Wars Galaxies game?
Restoration.
Is it Star Wars Restoration or Star Wars Galaxy Restoration?
Star Wars Galaxies Restoration.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because there are different. Ever since the Star Wars Galaxies emulator was developed, which I also contributed some code to, I did.
Is this the remake, like the fan remake of it?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So doing that was really cool because we had to reverse all of Sony's proprietary stuff and recreate it. We had to use like packet sniffers to figure out what their networking protocols were. All of that got documented, and then the stuff that I contributed directly by myself was I wrote some of their combat code and like the status effects and stuff. So like dizzy, knockdown, being on fire, that kind of stuff.
That seems pretty technical, triggering, and I mean, all that stuff also has like a bunch of other things that go into the back end of it. Animated things show that your character is whatever status effect probably, and mechanically changing how your character acts.
Yeah, but that was one of the things about like a Dishonored type game. And I when I was working on my own personal project, I guess about a year ago, I really wanted to make an MSIM. I still want to make an MSIM. I probably will at some point. But you can see how when you drop like all of that like multiplayer stuff, which is just basically a huge load of like security and verification stuff, and protocols. You drop all of that, and even with a game like Dishonored, you're left with like light detection. Like, am I standing in light or not? Because that hit
all
or
the
not?
Things that are in Dishonored that make an immersive sim are also just happening in like World of Warcraft, right?
Yeah. It's like, but it's all just simpler. So even something like an MSIM from a coding perspective is not hard. So I think outside of a multiplayer game or an MMO or something like Rainbow Six or something like that, like no one should be intimidated by the code. You can learn how to do it. It really helps if you know how and you follow good patterns. But even if you don't, you can still get something that works.
Pretty awesome. I mean, I guess that also makes sense why most indie games are single player experiences. Because then you also have to have like the servers and stuff. I mean, if you're not purchasing them or renting them from, Epic, I guess Epic owns Unreal, right?
Yep.
And I mean that also goes to kind of like the I on the Retro podcast I talked about some technical limitations of game development. Like back in the day, the games were incredibly efficient back in the day as far as like having to fit on a cartridge or having to fit on a CD or having to fit on a DVD. Just making sure that the size of the files were, on point, even like the positioning of it on the disc. Like I remember listening to like the Mist documentary, and they talking about how they had to have the game laid out exactly perfect on the disc in order for it to like the drive laser to move and read it at optimal efficiency and all this stuff. And pretty much a lot of that efficiency stuff is just completely out the window. Everybody has 4 terabyte hard drives and 64 gigs of mem. And, you know, even the worst graphics card from like 20 years ago is still good enough to play most stuff. It's crazy.
I would have had a real heyday. Sometimes I wish I had been born, you know, a decade or two earlier. Because I still do some of that type of stuff in my professional life. Like recently I was rebuilding the data pipeline for cars.com, for example. And before that I did a financial application that processed like millions and millions of transactions all at one time. Whenever you're doing something like that, you still have to do like optimization things. So like bit packing, like having, like an integer, a number on your system, is a series of 8, 16, 32, 64 bits. You can technically do 128 bit register integer if you use a different type of register on the processor. So that's all really technical. I won't describe that, but it's so basically what you have when you have those bits is you just have ones and zeros like 64 times.
Yeah.
And you can put any information you want in there as long as you encode it to binary, and then it'll just be represented as a number. So like a timestamp is 32 bits. So you could take up half of a 64-bit integer with a timestamp, and then you could slice off another 8 bits for what group this thing is part of, and then its ID with the rest of the 24 bits. Now you have this like seemingly random number that you've created, but you know how to take it apart and then have 3 different pieces of information. They used to do stuff like that. Like they would use like the red, green, blue alpha channels to like pack information in there, like pack data into it in that same way. It's really cool, but like now, like engines today don't even really support you being that optimized. Like Unreal, for example, it does a lot of like really lazy stuff to get a lot of their results.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, they show you like any preview I've ever seen from like them showing off Unreal Engine is from some ungodly like $30,000 mainframe system that just has the most absurd specs ever. Yeah, we can just like recreate actual reality in this computer. You will never be able to do it at home.
Yeah,
none of your games will run right.
Yeah, but it does have some so like it does make accessible some things that were previously would have been a really big deal. So like for example, behavior trees. You were talking about simulations, which gets into like AI. You know, I think a lot of people wonder, how is AI done? AI can happen in a few different ways. Most people have heard of like neural networks, but there's also decision trees, behavior trees, which are related to state machines. So Unreal does behavior trees for you, like out of the box, makes it pretty simple. I have written my own behavior trees from scratch before. And it can be challenging, I guess, because you have
daunting.
to get it to work.
Trying to figure out every possible thing that you want a thing to be able to do.
Yeah, based on its state. So it's like, I'm walking this direction. Oh, I just hit a boundary. I didn't see anybody on the way, so I'll just turn around and go back. You can also use like sine waves to do stuff like that. Like Mario, the little what do you call the little brown dudes, the mushroom dudes?
The Goombas.
Goombas, yeah. So them going back and forth, that's just a sine wave. You know, so the direction that they're going depends on whether the number is going up or down.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
There's like a lot of, which that's not really AI, but But
Yeah, I mean
behavior
that's not
tree.
AI. That's just programmed movement. But I'm sure that there's like decision trees of. I mean, I'm thinking Dark Souls characters of like, okay, this mob can do one of 6 attacks, and then this attack, if he starts this first part of the attack, can do one of 2 attacks, and then if it does this attack, it always does 3 hits or something like that, and then
Yeah.
whatever. And so it has a bunch of random moves that it's like on a thing, and it's like, all right. You have 20 moves. This one is 10 times more likely to happen than the other ones. So you just figure out all the randomized percentages for things, and it's just and sometimes it's not even rolling a random number. It's pulling from a random string that's not random, or whatever. I've heard some crazy RNG notations.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to do all of that. But again, like, I think it's not something to be intimidated by with an engine. I think it would be okay to be intimidated by doing a behavior tree from scratch, because that's hard. It's hard to just get it to work, and then you have to optimize it to be fast enough. But Unreal has already done that for you. You just say, like, I want to make a behavior tree, and then you're putting the settings in. So, like, I think a lot of times people get intimidated by all that kind of stuff, when the modern engines have made it really accessible to pretty much anybody.
That's really great. I mean, that's probably why you've seen in the last really like 10 years, I guess 5 to 10 years, a huge surgence of indie games, and even studios kind of like taking baby studios under their wings and just make like the whole space is so much easier to get into than it used to be. There's so much plug. Like if you have an idea, it's so much easier to just say, maybe a buddy can just go do this project, and it'll take a couple years, but we don't need like a 200-person team to make a game happen.
Yeah, I think that gets important, because like with AI and stuff now, like the LLMs, like generative AI, AI that can do animation for you, et cetera, et cetera. Some of those are kind of squirrely, but I think even if you take AI out of the picture and you're just looking at the tools that we have, like Unreal Engine, the tools that we have now are amazing. We can do stuff in in a couple of hours that used to take entire teams weeks to do. And so I think when you have that kind of power, that anyone and everyone can do it. But so now what separates you isn't the ability to execute, it's the ability to have a good idea and portray the idea well, and to have like good art, to have good dialogue, to have a compelling story.
Yeah, make sure all of the entire package is good. The old like why am I stuck in silver or whatever mentality of like everybody got kind of like a buff. Everybody got a buff on it being easier to make games from a I need a framework to build my game around standpoint. And now all of the other things that you have to do, from story to art to actually managing to get the game out to somebody, is where you shine or fail. And that's kind of awesome. I mean, that means higher quality stuff, hypothetically, right? Or
yeah, it definitely can. Like, I mean, like I was saying that I was working on an MSIM before, like just as an indie project, and pulling Rachel in for some ideas sometimes. That's something that not very long ago at all, an MSIM like would have been completely unattainable for a solo dev. But you could do one now with a couple of years of effort, and then you outsource a couple of things like music and voice acting or something like that, if you have any budget. And there you go.
Immersive sim, no voice actors, no sound.
Yeah, that wouldn't work.
But I was thinking, trying, you could just go into your character model program, make 50 people or whatever, and now you just go in and make your decision trees, and you're like, all right, well, I've got my town. and
Yeah, exactly.
or whatever,
Yeah, and then it all goes into level design after that.
level design, assets to make everything be exactly what you want it to be. Somebody writing a plot.
Yeah.
How dare? So for all that, we sort of did go over a bunch of different tools that fall into your toolboxes. You that fall into your toolbox to use in game development. What are your specifically like best tools for game developers, especially indie game developers?
Yeah. I think like I definitely think it's worth it to spring a couple $100 on the Substance suite that I mentioned. Just because I haven't used anything else that even comes close yet. Unreal does technically have a material editor in it where you can create materials, but it's not nearly as good as the Substance suite. So like I would say if you're like brand new and you don't even know if it's something that you're into yet, just grab Unreal or Unity or Godot, because there can be a technical limitation as well. Unreal is a resource hog. I actually had to upgrade my system to run it and have it load in reasonable times. So like if you're a person that can't do that, Unity is probably a good choice and tool. Just get into your,
I don't even do I don't do any game development myself, and Unreal, Unity, and Godot are household names, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. So most of the stuff that you can do with other tools, you can do inside of your engine. Is basically what I was getting around to. So like materials, shaders, all that animation, you can often do that inside your engine. The only thing you can't do inside your engine is modeling or pixel art. So you do need something for that. For pixel art, Ace Sprite is really good. ASE Sprite. That's kind of like de facto pixel art. And then there's Blender for 3D, which is pretty much a no-brainer as well. And then if you really like voxels, which is like, Minecraft, Qb stuff, there is something called Magica Voxel that I've used. And there's also something called, I'm forgetting it right now. It's like called Quixel or something. There's another one that's pretty good. But I just used Magica Voxel when I was doing it. It was good enough. And so those are like the art tools. So I would really just start with art tools and engine. And then I think pretty quickly you'll get to a point where you're like, okay, well, actually, I need more tools than this to do some of the stuff that I want to do.
Because you were saying that the engine itself does, that's where you're animating everything, right? You're figuring out how everything moves, and the physics of the world and the mechanics of your game are all built into the engine. So, as far as additional tools are concerned, once you've chosen your engine, you're not really springing for too much more gameplay wise. From that point on, it's just, using the engine to build whatever experience you want to have happen.
Yeah. Beyond that, so like for me, I wanted to be able to do stuff at like a AAA kind of level, which meant that I did need to get some tools. But really beyond that, what you're doing is you're spending money to save time.
Yeah.
Because there are Blender plugins, for example, that you can get that help you do like hard surface modeling. I have one that I'm currently forgetting the name of. But if you looked up like Blender hard surface modeling plugin, I'm sure you would find it. I bought that thing for like $25. There's one that I bought called Quad Remesher, which is something that a software like ZBrush does for you, but ZBrush isn't free. So but it takes hours to remesh something by hand. There are plugins and stuff that you can spend, some money on here and there that can save you hours of time.
Yeah, it seems like every plugin that you get or every app just simulates you having other people on your team. So, what is that? So with those tools in mind for an indie developer, what kind of things does that limit them with as far as like building out their first games? Are they really limited in what kind of projects that they can work on with those limited kinds of tools? Or is it something to where like the difference between getting the basic stuff and getting a little bit more stuff to work on their project is not very far apart from each other? I assume infinite money is like as much as you can spend, but
yeah. I mean, you can even do like motion capture and stuff yourself now for like $1,000 for the whole like suit and recorder and everything.
wow.
So like, especially if you're like an established, career professional that wants to invest in it as a serious hobby. If you're willing to put like $2,000 or $3,000 into it, you can basically take the cap off of what you're technically capable of. At that point, I think it's then all about time, and the time really comes down to content, and also I would say your experience level. So, like if you've never programmed anything before, you've never used Blender before, you've never done visual effects before, and don't know how any of it works, then if you you should go with the tiniest project that you could imagine. Like, I don't know, like Space Invaders or something. Because what you're really doing is learning tools and processes, which takes forever.
Yeah, you got to walk before you can run.
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of like events, game jams that are out there that just like are a bunch of people that are trying to learn how to get into game development, and they're trying to do quick little projects to show that you don't need a million years or whatever to just get something up and running and push forward, because sometimes you're building a game and it's not to build a whole game, it's to learn how to animate some guy jumping up on an object or whatever. So you build a little jumping object game with a couple levels to just say, hey, I can do this now. And, you just continuously add things to your repertoire until you have all the skills that you need to actually build the game that you want.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it does require discipline and learning. I think it's worth it to learn there's tons of YouTube videos. I mean, this is the case with everything, but I think that game dev is especially bad in this department where, all the time, everywhere, people are trying to sell you shortcuts to something.
Oh, that's everything. Every industry, everything is just, hey, can I pay for less time doing the thing?
Be a master in 3 days.
I mean, you can't really buy patience, right? That's like the whole thing is like patience, discipline, of being disciplined with yourself, having patience with yourself to know that you aren't going to become a master in a day. Give yourself the opportunity to fail, learn from your failures, move on, grow.
Yeah, I do think it helps. There are some places that I found. Tom Lumen is one of them. Looman. He has 2 Unreal courses. Both of them cost about $450, but they're very good. And he is like an industry person. He worked at Epic and made games for a long time. So it's like I think it's worth it to learn how to do things properly, and to just take the time that requires. I think like a lot of things, sometimes what can happen is people want the end result without the road to get there.
Yes.
So someone's like, I want to be a game developer, and I've talked to these people like, I want to be a game developer. here's my game idea. I'm working on it, but none of it works right now because I'm not sure how to do it. And it's like, oh, cool, that's not a problem. Like, here's some resources where you could learn how. I think then the telltale sign becomes, is it something that you actually want to work out and learn and get better at and study? Or when it comes to that time of like, okay, well, now I need to learn. I've seen a case where the person never does that step. They like just go play games or do something else instead. And it's like, okay, well, you apparently don't actually want this, right? So
yeah, it can be incredibly difficult to. I mean, it's the same thing. Everybody, people are like, I want to be in good shape. It's like, all right, well, what do you got to do to get in good shape? Well, you got to stop eating so much. You got to go to the gym, right? Well, what if I don't do those things? Am I still going to get in shape? Well, no. Oh, there we go. Tickets to the gun show, free 50 today. But I mean, like, it's the same thing, right? Or, you know, somebody wants to be a teacher, but they don't want to go to school to be a teacher. What the, or you know, they want to be a mechanic. You got to learn from somebody. It doesn't necessarily mean go to college. It just means like, you know, acquire skills, work on acquiring skills. And if you work on something every day, you'll eventually, you know, build a mountain or build a video game or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, there are ways to do it. Like the only things that I've ever in my life done sustainably are things that I approached just a little bit at a time. Like I really changed the way that I eat. I used to basically live on like Taco Bell and Hardee's, and
it's a good life.
Yeah. And
it's a good life till you die from it.
Yeah. And you know, now we eat eggs and spinach and like raisin toast in the morning and like yogurt and fruit snacks with granola, and we do spinach and protein powder shakes for lunch, and we mostly fish as protein now. It's like that seems like that is a drastic shift, right? But I didn't do it all at once.
Sure.
I actually made small changes over years.
Sure, you didn't just flip a switch and stop getting Hardee's.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm sure you still have your occasional cheat day where you get your Taco Bell, your Hardee's or whatever, because you're in a rush or whatever. But yeah, having a general like meal plan, having a plan is pretty critical to the success in a lot of different things. And also, I mean, right there, you have, you know, you guys are working on it together, so you have somebody holding you accountable for it. And I think that might be one of the challenging factors of some small team game development operations, is just like you have to have some form of accountability. And if you're just like, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow, it's treating it like it's an actual project that has the merit of somebody classifying it as like a job or something, instead of just it's whatever. There's needs to be accountability.
Yeah, I think there's some stuff that you can do there. Like you can actually keep it, like you can tell someone, I'm learning game dev or I'm working on a game right now, but don't tell them the idea, not because you think they'll steal it or anything, but just so you don't get like the satisfaction of them being like, wow, that's super cool. Because there's actually something psychological in us that happens that like, say that I tell you my MSIM idea and you're like, wow, that sounds great. I would love to play that. Well, now I've psychologically already gotten like the satisfaction, like the dopamine of like a satisfied player. And so there's no need for me to go make it. So like
the very idea that it could exist is enough.
Yeah. So it's the same with like writing or anything. I think there's this cutoff point before you like really tell people what it is. And that could be, for me, I think that point needs to be playable demo. Like I want to get really far because Because I don't know if I'm like more susceptible than everyone else to that phenomenon, but I am really susceptible to it. So I know even if I went and like planned it all out and wrote my game doc and everything, like if I show that to someone and they think it's really cool, then part of me just thinks that I'm done. So before I invite too many people in, I want to have a playable demo. And I think that kind of thing keeps you going. Because like if I tell you something like, I'm working on a game. I'm working on a game. I think you'll like it.
I'm working on a game. I think you'll like it. What kind of game is it? Oh, well, it's this RPG with this expanding story or whatever, you know. I haven't written a page of it, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, you know, if you're gonna say that you're working on a game, and you just need to be able to be like, all right, I made a game where I can run and jump and skip across an obstacle course. That's my game. And you have a demo that does that. You feel like you can now say, I've done the thing, so that you know you have reached this moment and locked it in. Because at that point, it's mostly polish, right? You need to get
yeah. Because even if you look at like it was an MMO, but the game Trove had all these little dungeons where you're basically doing 3D platforming with traps and fireballs and stuff like that. Something like that, if you did like a single player version, is really, really easy to make now. Like very easy. A game like Oh Dear, the party game. I just bought it for Jared actually. But it's a game where there are players that are pretending to be deer, and then there's a hunter. That game, looking at it, like I could make that game in like a weekend. It's like there are some like really simple ideas, and so I think at some point there becomes no excuse, and I guess I would include myself in this, right? It's like there becomes no excuse to not produce something when you say that you're doing it, unless you're really not that into the idea. I have noticed that in myself as well, where I did this for writing for a time as well. Like I kept trying to write epic fantasy because I thought that stuff like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Name of the Wind, which is right there.
Where's my Brandon Sanderson at? Where's my Starlight Chronicles?
I actually don't like Brandon Sanderson, but
unfriended, kicked off the podcast. But I mean, writing an epic fantasy like that is an undertaking, right? Because you're not writing the story that's happening in that book. You're writing the history of the world and the universe and thousands of years of history. You're creating a setting, and then you're putting stories in that setting.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's a huge undertaking. It's sort of the dungeon master's conundrum when you're playing a bunch of D&D and you're the dungeon master and you're like, all right, do I make a town, or do I make a continent, or do I make a world? Like, how big is this game? How long is it going to go on for? How much effort should I put into how big the world is and how deep everything goes?
Yeah. But like in that, I think you can also trick yourself. Like I was trying to write epic fantasy because I thought epic fantasy was cool. And when I got more into reading like literary fiction, I found that what I enjoyed reading the most was not epic fantasy, actually. Like I still enjoy some of them. Like I like Name of the Wind, but Name of the Wind has some real flaws. There's one by Stephen King that I read recently called Fairy Tale or something. But I found that like I liked these little shorter, like almost like slice of life. I really like suspense. I like surrealism. Like I found this whole thing that I liked that I didn't know I liked. And so what I was constantly trying to write when I was younger was something that I actually didn't even really care about. And so I would always fizzle out. And so I think with the games you could do something similar where you're like, oh, well, I need to do an easy game and a platformer is easy, so I'm going to make a platformer. But maybe you just really don't care about platformers. It's like you're probably going to, there has to be something in it that you're excited about that's going to drive you. Because like, that's why I went toward MSim away from like just like an action FPS. Cause like, you and I are both in a community that is like really into like action FPS, like Doomish games and stuff. I have like zero interest in games like that. Like bunny hopping, shooting, blowing stuff up, going from level to level, just like mass killing. I'm not interested. And I actually tried to make one of those at one point, and like when I like sat down to make the stuff, I'm just like, I don't actually care about this project. And so yeah, I think it's important.
I've also noticed that a lot of games are disguised as other games. Like for example, Doom Eternal or whatever it's a shooting game, but it's a puzzle game where you're trying to match the right weapons or with the right enemies, navigate the stage in the right way. It's not really like a click on heads kind of shooter game. It's a puzzle game disguised as a shooter. Whereas like Call of Duty is click on head simulator. Can you click on the head before the other person can click on the head? Those are kind of very fundamentally different things, but I don't know. I've always enjoyed games that subvert the expectations. Like I really enjoyed Doom, and I don't really like a lot of FPSs.
Interesting. Yeah, I liked Hexen better than Doom, probably for the reason that you're saying. But also, like when you go back that far, also like game design was not an established field yet.
I mean, Hexen has way more RPG elements to Doom. Doom is like go through each level as quickly as you can, get to the next level, and then it's pretty much like a reset back to full HP. You got whatever guns you were supposed to have for the level. You do the next level. It's like even got a timer, right?
Yeah. But now there's a lot of like I think it's actually really incredible that the people back in those days, like Romero and whoever made Hexen, I don't actually know.
Whoever made Hexen. You mean the creator of Daikatana? George?
Oh
my goodness.
No, yeah, I actually don't know who made Hexen. That seems like something I should know, but I think it's actually really cool that those guys produced what they did because like I was saying, like game design wasn't like this big established field that had like like actual like psychological research and other areas of design applied to it and stuff yet. They were a little bit shooting in the dark. So I actually think it was impressive when they managed to get some stuff really right.
Yeah, I mean they were doing a lot with a little, like very little. It's like the argument they put a man on the moon with, essentially less than your microwave these days, like worth of technology. Like your microwave hooks to the Bluetooth, like or to your Wi-Fi for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I mean, and it's awesome that there's like so many resources and things are very accessible, and things like YouTube make it so you don't have to go to a physical school to like get into any kind of programming or development or visual arts or any of these things. You can tackle all of these things on your own time, and I'm sure you can find just as good as any college level course in doing these things. And for some people it's a pathway to an art expression kind of thing, and I mean for other people could be just revolutionize your future. You become the next ace game dev out there,
especially if you pay for courses from industry professionals, like whether that's Udemy or their own platform on Teachable or whatever. I think you get probably, I would say, much better than a college education for specifically your trade. Obviously college comes with other stuff like gen eds and it makes you a more well-rounded person, but But if like you just really want to learn how to do one specific thing, you can absolutely blow college education away, I think, with paid courses. YouTube is dicey. There's there's a lot of people that give bad advice on YouTube, but there are people that give like good advice as well. I think just as you go along, you learn how to sort those out.
Yeah, that's a pretty critical component that I think a lot of people need to live with these days is having a good bullshit detector.
Yeah.
'Cause there's a lot of false information that just floats around, and it can be incredibly difficult to immediately discern whether or not it's bullshit or not.
Yeah, there's everything that I know about level design, which I have these little notes all around my office. But
there you go, the post-it like the post-it library.
Everything that I have a whole drawer of them. But everything that I know about level design, I actually learned from YouTube, because there is the lead level designer for Arcane, Steve Lee, did a whole series on YouTube on level design. What makes a level immersive? How do you design a level? What do you put in a level? What does a level do? Like all of that kind of thing. He has like at least tens of videos on it. And I was doing some work travel, so I was just posted up in a hotel room, and I just like binge watched all of his videos for like a week. And that was awesome. So there are some like really good people on YouTube, but you got to be careful as well.
Yeah, and there's also like Skillshare and all those other websites that are designed to do similar things, where they take people that are industry professionals or what have you, and they package courses for different things. Or, if you want the number one rated chess player in the world to give you a chess instructional, there's probably a $1,000 course you can take over there or whatever for that. But yeah, the information exists, and it is, and the internet age makes it even easier to get everything you kind of need. I think that the key pillar in all of it is the motivation, having the willpower to see the project through to the end, and not just kind of like promise yourself that you'll get there, but actually getting there.
And planning really helps there as well. Like I know most people don't, especially for indie projects, they don't do like a game design doc or anything. But I think it can be really important to like plot out, like, what am I saying? How does the player do it? What kind of levels do I want to have? What do I want the experience to be like? Like just doing that, because then you have a direction, like you're trying to accomplish something specific. If you just have like a really vague idea, like, oh yeah, my game is about this, and that's kind of it, then what you will do, you are going to chase your tail. So it doesn't matter how much. You could have an absurd amount of discipline and work hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and you will still never finish because you don't know what you're making.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen that even like in the like professional engineering world, like entire companies will spend just millions. So like it goes to show that it's not a beginner thing. Like there are companies that spend like actual millions of dollars, and no one plans it out, and they go to execute, and they get something because you have a bunch of like professionals, but it's like not what they wanted, and then they rebuild, or they have to take longer or whatever. Like it's really important to have those initial steps to know specifically what you are making, like down as like the idea as specific as you can get it, even to like what kind of feelings do you want in the art and stuff like that.
I mean, those kind of documents, and especially if you're working with a team, you might not necessarily be working with yourself. But each of the different components, as you're building the document, should kind of fill itself out, because it's kind of asking you questions. What genre of game is this? Okay, boil it down. What like subgenre of game is this? What are we talking from the platform we're going to be putting it on? Who are we? What kind of clients are we serving? Everything top to bottom. And it's like, okay, all right, when I was thinking about this game, I wasn't thinking about all of the little nitty gritty details, but in going through and thinking it out, you might see these conflicts that are going to occur, just like I am building this really story heavy game and I'm doing it in a way that I can't really animate any expression or whatever. So how do I solve those problems, or what have you?
You can see problems before you get to them.
Yeah. And that saves you a lot of time. Make sure you get a more concise product together. I have a last question for you, if I will.
Sure.
To wrap things up. What is the most challenging technical problem that you've ever solved? This is your big brag moment. What is the most challenging technical problem that you're allowed to speak on that you have personally solved?
Like just ever in any like in
sure,
my career?
Anything. I don't care. Because the thing is solving a technical problem with a business platform is the same thing as solving one with a game. It has much more overlap than most people would think.
I'm trying to think. There are things that I thought were really challenging at the time that I would think are easy now.
Well, given that it's been a bunch of years and you've had to solve the problems before, right?
I think probably there isn't like any one like I need to learn how to solve this specific issue. It's like that's never the hardest part. The hardest part is always the package deal. So like I operated either a principal level now or even like a CTO level for small companies. And so what that means is that usually an executive team comes to me with just like an idea and they say like, this is our business idea. And we know that it's profitable, but we don't know how to build it. We don't know how to put it up. We don't know what do we need? How many people? How long will it take? What kind of budget are we looking at? And I got really interested in that kind of thing. So probably some of the stuff that's pushed me, the project that pushed me the most was definitely working on a financial application that I worked on recently. It was it was kind of like a QuickBooks kind of application, which doesn't sound that complicated.
I mean, QuickBooks ties into so many different things, and then it's got to use government shit too. So probably the biggest industry.
in this case, I had to learn accounting a little bit. I wasn't like in a CPA or anything, but like I had to learn what the words they were using meant. And so like when they talk about like cost basis and they're like, we need to calculate cost basis and we need to filter on ledger codes and blah. But they like the full picture ended up having several things going on. So not only was it like financial data, so it like always had to be encrypted everywhere. But then people were also dumping like tens or even hundreds of millions of transactions like per customer. So we were actually working with like billions of transactions. All of those had to be searchable. We wanted like real-time processing of accounts and stuff like that. And so when you start combining all of those things together, it becomes a really complicated problem. And so it gets into like data science because you're making like data lakes and then pulling information out. You use those custom IDs that I was talking about. There's the security aspect. There's there's like the product aspect of like, how do we present this? What kind of formats will we take? So like, I was pretty much the technical guy for that entire project. And like all of it together, like really did push me to my limits, because there was all kinds of different optimizations and the data piece of it. Normally something like that, you would have a specialist for like each area, but they had one specialist for the whole thing, which was me. And
the jack of all trades specialist.
Yeah.
Master of all.
So it kind of goes to show how that could like really stretch your capabilities. And like sometimes when something was out of like my direct experience, like the data science pieces, you can feel a little uncertain. But turns out everything that was designed was good to go. They're still actually operating off of my designs and my roadmaps. I haven't been working with them in over a year now, just at a year or so, and they're still operating off of all the design documentation and stuff that I wrote. That's kind of cool all by itself.
I mean, you built it. You turned a dream into a reality. You did.
So
you did it. That is part of the process that I enjoy for a lot of things, is building we need to do X, Y, or Z, and then going, okay, how do we make this manifest?
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself attracted to very similar work. But that same kind of thing is, why you kind of need, or at least I always felt like I needed to have multiple people with multiple different personalities working on projects, where you had to have somebody that was the very practical person, making sure that your expectations were reasonable. And then you have the people that are the visionaries to try and push you out of your boundaries, and people that are just like, all right, we got to do some coding today. We're coding 100 characters today.
Yeah. But that's why I think design, going back to design again, is like design is its own skill. So like the exact implementation of any one of those things that I was talking about is not that hard. Because especially when you get into like data structures and stuff, like you can just go like read a book or an article that tells you how a certain data structure works, and you just do it, or like there's an algorithm or whatever. Like a lot of that stuff kind of comes and gets easier with experience, but at the end of the day, even if you've never seen it before, you can figure it out. But design is like its own thing, and I feel like design doesn't get respected a lot as like its own entity and skill. Like the ability to put everything together in a cohesive way, the ability to turn an idea into a full thing, like that is its own skill. And that can be actually the most complicated piece. And I feel like it gets neglected a lot, both like in indie game dev as well as in the professional world. People just don't want to take the time to do it.
Yeah. I mean, they want results now. They don't want to think about what results they could have. They want the results. And like you were saying before, it has you chasing your tail a little bit, because you're, striving for this objective, but you didn't fully plan it out. So you end up working against yourself, at least for part of it, usually.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. I had a really good time sitting down and having a chat with you. Thank you very much for squaring out some time for me, and everybody else. Is there anything you want to shout out at the end here? Do you have anything that you care about? No, it's totally fine.
I have nothing. Nothing that I care about. I'm an absurdist.
An absurdist. I love it. Well, if you guys want to see Sheridan again, comment down below. He has a huge, vast wealth of knowledge about a bunch of different things that I'm sure we could have good conversations on. I have literally written on this notepad camping conversations, outdoorsman conversation with Sheridan. Nice. Hopefully we can get you back in here for that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Well, thank you very much for watching, guys. Hopefully the next episode will be queued up here rather soon, and then we'll catch you later. Thanks for watching.